am the law. Welcome back, Mere Mortals, episode 130. This is The Law. We are the Mere Mortals. We strive for excellence through life lessons. And today we're going to be talking about the law. What that might entail. Now, for me, I've got a few little tidbits on when law originated from. Some fun facts about law.
Okay.
And some of the commonalities around law.
Very good. I've got a little bit of a dive into common law versus civil law and religious and customary, as well as public versus private. And then just a couple of little interesting questions to kick us off.
Good. I like the variety there. Righto. So before, as always, mere mortal moment, I'm going to get started because mine doesn't relate too much. Don't just dip your toes in, dive right into the water. And I heard this very very similar quote, but mine's slightly different. Now this is both literally in the week. I went for a swim on Monday and I felt like dipping my toe because it wasn't humid in the afternoon. It was a little bit cold. It was 5:30 and I was walking towards the pool and I thought, I'm just going to dip my toe, maybe get my head wet. And I could see the thoughts going through my mind. I thought, no, you know what you got to do? Yeah. Like you always do with swimming, you got to put on your goggles, dive straight in and get going. I dove in and like the first 2 seconds, I was like, whew, taking it back. But as soon as you do it, cool, you're into it.
Yeah, so I used to be a dipper, I would say. I would say that was my mentality. But I think since doing the cold showers, I've definitely become a convert to the just get it done.
Dive right in. Yeah. So obviously that's a literal definition, but I also saw it apply in a lot of other areas. Not every single area, but a lot of other areas. Don't just dip your toe. Dive right in.
Very good, very good. Mine is, I don't know who makes the laws, but damn do I follow them. And this might get to, I'll leave this one for a little bit later because I think we'll get to the more serious stuff first, and then something a little bit about our natural dispositions and
good
how we approach the law.
All right. Now we're going to get a little bit serious. Let's define it first of all, because this is very hard. It's a tricky one because I originally began. All right, I'm going to define it for the mere mortals out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to define law. And what do I come up with straight away? There is very, very definitions of the law. And a lot of places say there isn't a definition of the law, which I was like, okay, that doesn't hold me in a good stead. So this is where I got to. A system of rules created and enforced through social or governmental institutions to regulate behavior. But another one that I got from Socrates, law is the correct judgment of the state.
Yeah.
So for me, it kind of fell in it's a system, it's more law is a system of rules enforced by an entity to the general population, as long as you assign yourself to being part of the state or being part of that culture, that tribe, or society. Yep. So you have to also assimilate yourself to being as part of that group for the rules to take effect on you.
I had pretty much the same thing. System of rules established in a community, enforced by judicial decision.
Yep.
And I think it's a tricky one because it is saying you're sort of consenting without consenting in a way, because it's not like I go around thumbing up every single law that there is out there, and it's impossible to do it because some of the laws are contradictory as well. So
I'm going to give you an example straight up of some of this stuff.
That's a good way.
Before we get into some of the other topics, is tax law. So I know only a little bit about tax law.
Yep.
And you might be wondering, why do I even know about tax law? Well, I work in a particular area at the moment that is dealing with tax. Give you a hint. But as part of that, I remember a couple of years ago, I did a project called the Limited Registration Entities Portal, which now became the Non-Residence Portal.
Ooh,
what is that?
I don't
sexy
care.
name.
It's
a sexy name. So I know, right? What it is was at a particular time, and it's still the case, for digital products to be charged, so taxed in Australia from global entities, was a really big issue because tax law can only go so far within bounds. And I love this because it's all about boundaries, right? So there's Australian tax law that deems everyone who participates as part of the state, Australia, as having to pay tax. But if you're a global entity, it's a bit murky. You don't really have to pay tax in that manner. Now, we built this non-resident portal, and I specifically remember, so this is the equivalent of, say, Netflix. If Netflix is providing a digital product to Australia, they're not enforced under the rules for tax law for Australia that they have to pay tax on GST for their products, but they're highly incentivized to do so that they have the full cooperation with Australian as a government and as a whole country. So that's just a little example that it's a system of rules created obviously by governments and entities and other parties, but you can't enforce them unless you're willing to participate as part of that state. So that's the example. If you're a global, that's why if you can have a law here in Australia, just because that law states X, doesn't mean that someone from anywhere else in the world has to uphold that until you're in the domain where that law enforces itself. So it's something really key to take that, because I've often also had conversations, and I've known someone obviously very close to me who's a lawyer who is very adamant that it very much depends on the context and the domain in which you're having some of these conversations.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea.
Yeah, I had maybe an even simpler version than that, which was when I was looking up copyright law, because I was debating one point or another of actually reading out large sections of Cien Años de Soledad, the very famous Spanish book, on sort of my Spanish YouTube channel. And I was debating like, okay, am I actually allowed to do that? What's the laws regarding that? And it did seem sort of murky in the sense that, well, it was, originally published in Colombia. Well, that doesn't really hold here in Australia.
Yep.
So I could sort of get away with it, but also not sort of get away with it, because it was depending on YouTube's platform, and YouTube can do whatever the hell they want, really. So if someone raised a complaint about me doing it, I'm pretty sure it'd get flagged and taken off or whatnot. So,
and the other one with law, obviously looking at the definition, it's rules that are created and are enforced by someone. So if there is a law, let's just say that you can't drink a mother while doing a podcast, or a monster, sorry.
Yeah, you were.
Sorry.
Easy.
Easy. So you can't drink a monster during a podcast, but no one was there to enforce it.
Yeah.
Is there a murky ground there where, okay, well, that's okay? Like if there's no one to enforce it, there's no issue behind it. Or maybe let's say that we're plagiarizing of something else somewhere in the world. Because it's not being enforced, like the happy birthday song. Sure, they could come and get you, but no one's enforcing it. So at that point, is it even a law that applies?
Yeah, it's sort of laws that are made to be broken, and then the opposite, which is unwritten laws, which are just, it's not set in stone that you shouldn't do this, but everyone knows you shouldn't do this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Now, let's take up a couple of, I'm going to take this point of view to start us off. So that's a little bit of a chitter-chatter of law, but where did it all come from?
Yeah.
Did you end up having a bit of a look into this?
No.
It really interested me, because I thought, what's the earliest time when you could consider law came into practice? Because straight away in my mind, not that it was law, but the Old Testament in terms of what was written on the tablet. If you follow sort of Christian, the storyline, and it goes, you get your 12, is it 12?
12 commandments.
Yeah, your 12 commandments. And I'm thinking, maybe that's what we considered law. No, it goes further back. And I actually found myself digging into this for quite a little while, because I originally found this thing which stated, in the 22nd century BC, some ancient Sumerian ruler formulated the first extant law code, so consisting of causistic statements. So that's the if-then statements. So that's when they really formalized the ability of, okay, if you do this, then we're going to do that. But it does go further back than that, because they did find that there's ancient Egyptian law, 3000 BC, which was based on the concept of ma'at, which was characterized by tradition, rhetorical speech, social equality, and impartiality. However, I kind of dug into this a little bit more. And the idea is people just say, well, that seems to be where law kind of began. But they don't have further proof or any more written things that says, oh, well, there probably was something beforehand. My thought is it probably went well further beyond back. And it stems back to my definition. It's rules created by social or governmental institutions. I can imagine that definition, there would have been cavemen, which was, the big papa caveman would have said, no, you must come talk to me if you want to eat food. Obviously not even in English, it's just in whatever roaring they want to say.
Yeah.
But I would have said that there was some version of law or rules enforced by what they termed as, the top of the pyramid, way back then.
Definitely.
But yeah, that's what I sort of found. That those if-then statements came around 22nd, 100 BC.
There you go.
And I was like, interesting. Very interesting.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you want to keep going?
I do. So another point of this is pretty much it came down to law has existed as long as organized human society has also existed. So that I was trying to pull out a little bit of it just because I was saying origins could be beforehand, but the advent of writing is obviously what we can see left on record. And that organized human society, so law has always existed as organized human society, makes me think, does that mean that if we just became unorganized, if all of a sudden we all disbanded and became individualistic, would we also see the demise or no longer any law available? To me, I just think, well, it would be really hard to enforce if everyone was just individualistic. If everyone was just thinking to themselves and there was nothing to govern anybody, that would become a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
But it just played in my mind that, okay, since organized human society, that's really when law also came about.
Yeah, I wouldn't even think of it in that way. I would just say it's something that naturally springs up no matter what humans are. So you get 10 humans on a deserted island, they're going to create some sort of rules for living together on that island.
Yep.
You just can't do it without that. Everyone.
Yeah, and
you can, but you just kill everyone. I think that's what ends up happening.
I think the point that more called out to me is I said organized human society, but there wasn't really a description of what that meant. And if I'm thinking about it like rules,
well, I'm not sure you can have human society that's unorganized.
Okay,
so I would even say that's a misnomer.
Okay,
and just no.
Well, more the point that I was thinking was, okay, well, imagine just an organized chimpanzee colony.
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining that they would have some rules that they have amongst their colony, amongst their group. Would you then term that as law as well? Is it the fact that it's not written down that doesn't make it law, that it's just purely rules? Like, is it the fact that we actually have a written down and if then? Because if then exists in a lot of other places. Like, that happens in colonies with animals. Just if you go and do this, then the alpha male is going to come and beat your ass because you took the last banana. Like, that happens. That totally happens. But we don't call that law for them.
Yeah.
We just call them the rule of whatever they do.
I would say law sort of, if for me it implies that it needs to be written down, and the laws of the universe sort of strikes me as well that that's something that needs to be written down.
Yeah.
You can't, if you can only explain it to me and you can't write it down to me, I'll sort of go.
Yeah, okay. and that's where I sort of play in my mind with the definition with all of these, like Socrates says, law is the correct judgment of the state. I would take it a step further and says it's got to be able to be written down or communicated in that manner, or else it isn't law. Because you could go to someone and say, "Hey, the law is you can't look like an idiot." And is it like, are you enforcing this law? Like, where is that coming from? Where's the power? Where's the I don't know where exactly it would stem for you to have the power to make that such a statement.
Yeah. For me, law also implies it's more like we said. It's like a system of rules. So that what you just said then that sort of sounds more like just a rule to me.
That's
the rule
true.
is
It's not a system of rules. That's a good point.
But if it would be a law, I guess, if you had, you can't wear pink with green. You can't wear, funny top hats on certain days of the week or whatnot. And if there was a whole list of things underneath that, then I could sort of be like, oh, okay, that sort of makes sense as a law.
Yep. No,
very good. Very good. Do you want me to enlighten you?
Enlighten me, please. Yes.
Okay, because this was enlightening to me. So I was starting to look up, okay, what are the different types of laws? What are the, I guess, like general systems of laws that there are? And I came across common law versus civil law, which I'm sure you've heard of before, if maybe know nothing about. I knew a little bit about common law. But then there was also, I guess, I think, and this is really hard to tell because it was, people would use different names for sort of the same thing, but I'm just going to say this is my outcome of what...
These mere mortal fellas.
There's the mere mortal laws. This is how we're
This is how we roll.
So it seemed to me there was 4 different types. There was common, civil, religious, and customary. And this is for countries in the world.
I can already hear the lawyers in the back like, where's cyber law? Where is this?
Yeah,
okay.
And a mix of these 4.
Yep.
Yeah, so common, and this is, once again, this is sort of general. So, I mean, if you look at it, every country has a mix sort of these things with, we've probably laws in Australia that are relics from when we were more Christian based and whatnot. So there's probably some of those still in there. So you could say, oh, it's a mix, but whatever. So there's roughly 80 countries with common law. Okay. So that's where it relies on published judicial opinions. So precedents. So that's sort of when you're going into a court case and the judge looks at similar court cases from the past and what those judges decided, and then he'll use that to help him in his decision or her decision for your court case.
Yep.
If you contrast that with civil law, roughly 150 countries with that. So it's in more countries, but the 80 countries that have common law make up a bigger bulk of people. So most people live under common law. That's because it's in sort of America, Australia, UK, and then some dotted other countries.
Did China have common law?
I can't remember looking at the map. I think it was a mix, if I had to guess.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, don't know. Civil, so that relies on codified written statutes. So that's sort of like you were saying. They'll go through the big books of, there's the big book, and then there's the smaller big book of the big book, and it just goes down and down. So those were
down the rabbit hole.
They don't particularly look at a very similar case, although they might, but they won't use it as much as they would. This is what this sentence says.
Yeah, so I guess another example is
that
it'd be like statutory regulations. It would be actually past legislations that go through the houses, things that state this has been approved by the party, by the house. It has been ticked. If you're not meeting this, you're against the law.
Yep, exactly. Religious, this was sort of roughly 15 countries which are super strict on this. So there's sort of Sharia law.
Yep.
For the most part, because they're mostly in the Middle East, and that's derived from text and or tradition. So that's where you're using the Quran or the Jewish Yom Kippur. I can't remember what their actual text is called. Idea. When they're using that, and their laws are sort of derived from that original one, I guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then customary, which is sort of rooted in the customs of a community. And that's, I guess, a little bit vaguer, because I guess it's saying, we used to do these sort of things, and then we'll write it down. And then that's, I guess, how we're using it.
Gotcha.
And then, there's plenty of countries which have a mix of common and civil, or civil and religious and whatnot. So,
and a lot of those would then stem the subtypes. So when people think tax law, cyber law, privacy, all these things, I guess they would form some combination of common law and civil law.
Yeah, well, I'll actually just speak about that. So I think that those are probably better to be thought of either falling under public or private, which is all of these countries sort of have a public and private balance. So public concerns the government or societal. So that's something constitutional, administrative law, criminal law. So I guess that's when it's saying, Australia decides, okay, we're going to lock down all the borders because we need to do this for society. So that would be under public law. And then private is between individual and organizations. So that's contracts, properties, torts, commercial law. So that's when, I guess, I have a dispute with you over who's more handsome. And I obviously go in and win. And
I settle out of court.
One settles out of court. And so that's where it's like the difference between public and private. And so that's, I think that covers for me, if coming into the conversation, if with no research, I would have guessed just like say anything about law. I would have said, oh, okay, I guess I know there's public and private, and I know there's civil and common, and that would have been about the extent of
Look, I'm going to say as well, I'm going to interject here at this point and say, I'm really glad I didn't do law as well. I did a little bit more reading through. Reading anything to do with law is boring as.
It never appealed to me.
I can't. It doesn't. You're talking about this, and I see the interest, but at the same time, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Like, sure, it applies. I understand when it applies to sections, but on the whole, I don't care to know all the various different sort of legislations. No. Get digging deep. Nah, not for me. So sorry about that, lawyers. I just can't come to terms with it. But I did actually enjoy this particular thing. So one thing in my little search about what is law, how can you talk about it, I found this one video which were talking about that law can range depending on the context that it's used. So they suggested not to go down the path of talking about law as a definition or as a particular thing, but as a function of which it proceeds in. So law in protecting businesses and consumers, preserving morals and norms, preserving world peace. So looking at law as a general function of doing all these things in all the different states that you want to play at, because then it helps you differentiate almost the values of where the intent of the law comes from. So you can see the difference between, let's just imagine, most developed countries, they would probably want to see a protection to business and consumers when you're sort of interacting and sort of consumer protection laws. However, there's a lot of countries that are either developing or are still coming through that have no consumer protection laws at all. And so you can say that maybe both countries have consumer protection law, but that's a misnomer because they don't. They're completely different things. So you can't just say that consumer law here is the same as consumer law there. Like, no, totally different. So you can't just go by definition. You have to go by the function of what the law is intending to do. And that'll give you a better definition of it across. Kind of gets back to also at the beginning I was saying tax law, or let's talk property law. Just because you know about property law, tax law here in Australia does not give you an indication that you're going to know anywhere else in the world. You'll understand maybe the terms and maybe the context and a couple of other things, but the way things work can be really, really different because the function of it is very different, or even just the way that law sort of works in those countries can be very different. So I found that really interesting, that just because you know one doesn't mean that you can just easily relate that elsewhere, which made me think, God damn, I'm glad I learned something which is super relatable to other places like engineering or physics and chemistry, where it doesn't matter if I'm in Australia or in the US or in UK, you know, you ain't going to change the way an atom works or the way levers work or a pulley works. But the fact that if you learn law here, it's, you know it, but you don't know it in other countries. You kind of have to begin almost not from scratch, but you're very damn close. I thought, okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think a good way of encapsulating just that idea was if you have ever dug into like tax evasion and what it actually is, and trying to reduce your tax, because the government doesn't want you to, but they also allow you to at the same time. And so I remember listening to the Property Couch a bunch of times, and they would just constantly get questions of, you know, if I do this, I can, you know, transfer this onto my wife. And he's saying,
well, it's not tax evasion, it's tax minimization.
Yeah. He was saying, you know, it depends on what your intent is. If your intent is to not pay taxes on this thing, yes, that's tax evasion. But if you're doing it to minimize your tax, then it's sort of okay. So it's just so vague. Like, you know, what's that boundary line between you doing crooked things versus you doing what is legal, but, you know, going right up to the limit of what you're allowed to do.
Yeah. One of the other things in this, goes to civil law, because usually where the legislation sit. How much legislation have you read?
None.
Zero. Okay. So I'm going to give some free tips to people at home. If you ever have to read legislation, first of all, boring as shit. But two,
just jump off a bridge.
When you read legislation, you can't read on its own section. So legislation is usually split up. I'm talking Australia, but it's broadly like this. Chapters. Within chapters, you have the sections, and within the sections, you have some subsections. You can't read a subsection on its own. That's not how it works. So you cannot read, if I read a chapter and it says, if this happens, then this happens, that's correct in that boundary. But you actually have to read that section as part of the entire legislation, right? I just think there could be better ways to structure the way things like this is. I almost feel like this was written so that lawyers can read it and write it to each other. But for a common person to go and read legislation, it's quite difficult. And I'll give you an even more clear and precise way that this functions. There is so many, I'm not going to call them out. There is so many state agencies and federal agencies that are not meeting legislation. So if you're listening to this, you are not meeting legislation. I know this for an absolute fact. So they are not meeting the law. If they got found out, imagine this. It happens all the time. But the law and the legislation is so hard to understand or so hard to implement that they just don't do it and nobody cares. And what they'll usually do is they'll hire consultants to go and do it for them. Yeah, so a big job that I used to do, and I know people in companies who do this, is they say, hey, here's the legislation. It's changing from this to this. You tell me what I've got to do because I have no idea.
Yeah.
This happens all the time. I swear it could be written a better way. Like there's got to be a more clear, intentful way to do this. I disagree with the way that it's always written.
Well, I don't think it's that surprising that when they're talking about what jobs are AI going to take away, a lot of them are lawyer type ones, whether it's the back work and the officers verifying this and this. You know, if they're all if and then statements.
That's
AI, up AI's alley for sure.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what comes out of that, and you know, if just big sweeping changes occur or whatnot, and then you, I mean, look, you don't have to look so far to really see that there's just some so archaic ones that are still in the system somehow. You know, if you walk through the street with a salmon of more than 3 kilos, then you have to, it's like a public whipping or some shit. And
Here we go.
And that is still...
You've led me right in, so I'm gonna have to get into the weird laws. I found a lot.
Nice.
But I just wanted to find the 2 best ones that I'm like, okay, I want to talk about this. First one is Parliament's famous Salmon Act of 1986.
Oh, so it was on salmon.
It is.
Is this in Australia?
I believe so. And it states that it's illegal to hold salmon under suspicious circumstances. You cannot hold them under suspicious circumstances. So, let me read this to you. Under Section 32 of the Salmon Act 1986, it stipulates that it is an offence to handle salmon under suspicious circumstances. And sorry, this is in England and Wales. So it creates an offence in England and Wales for any person who receives or disposes of any salmon in circumstances where they believe or could reasonably believe that the salmon has been illegally fished. Maximum penalty, 2 years imprisonment. Dang, so you better watch out when you're walking around with a bit of fish out in England and Wales. And it's interesting.
Don't wear an overcoat, people.
Don't
wear dark glasses.
A lot of the ones that I was finding were like, in old, they were built in 1986, so 30 years ago.
Yeah. And
it's like, okay, they're still around. Like, is that a thing that we really should be worrying about? Another one, if you own any chickens in Quitman, Georgia, it is illegal to let them cross the road. You cannot let them cross the road in Georgia.
So many jokes wasted.
It's crazy. Another one, in Milan, in Italy, it states that it is a legal requirement to smile at all times except at funerals or hospitals. So that is a legal requirement. It comes from, so it was prescribed by city regulation from Austro-Hungarian times, and it was never repealed. So this is one of those laws that we were talking about. I bet you some people are breaking this right in this very second, and they don't know about it.
Yeah.
But it's because nobody's there to enforce it. So is it even a law anymore? But it is. Technically, it's written down somewhere, and you could get charged for it. So when you go to Milan, smile.
Yeah, be on the lookout.
And the last one that I found, which I thought was pretty hilarious, in Samoa, it is illegal to forget your wife's birthday.
Damn.
It is illegal.
Man.
It is unclear how long the sentence would be, but maybe some time apart for you to think about how to make it up to her wouldn't be too bad. So I thought, what kind of laws is going on here?
Feminism taking strides.
Jeez.
Damn. They're taking over, man. That's insane.
And I bet you could just keep going and going and going and finding the most ridiculous laws that just nobody's enforcing, nobody's looking at.
Yeah.
That exist out there.
Yeah.
I found this pretty funny.
Yeah, it's funny that I did know something about the salmon.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was for suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, don't be holding them for some suspicious stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if I see someone holding a salmon out on the road, I'm going to think they're suspicious.
Yeah.
If you're walking around with a big salmon in the middle of the city, I'm going to I'm going to report you to the police because don't do that.
Nice. So you asked me before, is there, have I read any of the legislation and whatnot? And I haven't. And to be honest, this is the first time I've really looked at it. So I was going to ask you, are there things you feel embarrassed about not knowing? So I wouldn't say I was super embarrassed by this, but I'm judging by, sort of how easy it was to have a little bit of a look at it. I would say, oh man, I was pretty damn ignorant about, I guess, just the general laws. I don't need to dive into all the specifics you were talking about, but there is a very big difference between religious law and common law. So
the big one for me with law that I'm always, and still, I'm a little bit not confused, but if someone had to tell me to explain, I'm not really sure. And it's how things work between high court, Supreme Court, local court, regional court. I'm like, I have no idea within which courts go and do what. I know kind of a semblance that the high court and the Supreme Court cases can get elevated if they get challenged. But where's the definition? Where does it go from local and where does it go higher? I think that's something you should know. I feel like people should know this, but
it's hard because that's one of those ones where it's, you probably really want to have a good understanding of the law before you get sued, for example. The first time you get sued, that must just suck balls because you would have no idea.
The other one, I guess, really is probably, we're getting into it more and more and more. So, we should probably think about it at one point, but law all around producing content and using other people's content. So we quote lots of other people loads of times. We share content. We talk about things. It could, at any point in time, I'm sure someone could say to us, oh, you were not allowed to talk to that. That's under the legislation. You can't mention that, et cetera, et cetera. I would have no idea. So I think being a little bit more informed than that would be good, especially if it's the area that we're doing a lot of stuff in.
Yeah, I think we're doing all right just because we're avoiding the big booby traps, which is playing music, no matter how big or short it is. That's we're okay on that front.
But it's like the financial stuff. Like do you always have to put a little thing disclaimer saying like, we are not financial advisors, do your own. But however, buy SI6, do it.
I think you can sort of talk your mouth. Totally talking my mouth. I think you can talk bullshit as long as you don't have some sort of degree or something, you're almost hiding behind. Like all the property catch people, they've got, they're financial advisors, so they've got some sort of thing they've earned, or they're property brokers, so they've got
But they still put disclaimers on financial advice.
Yeah.
Like they still don't provide financial advice.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, because I would say that's because they have those things, whereas, I'm just a total jackass with no qualifications, so I sort of feel like I can get away, even though it should be more dangerous for me to say, just talk my mouth. I would say I think I can in a way.
Speaking of financial advice, I mean, this is a little bit side of the law. Do you know how much it costs?
ABC.
Do you know how much it costs to have the license that's for a financial advisor or for similar things like running a hedge fund?
No.
I've looked at this before multiple times. Costs roughly about in Australia $20,000 to get your license.
Okay.
Right? And there's a process behind doing all this. So all the paperwork, that's pretty cheap to be honest. That's not huge.
Bad.
And then the subsequent reporting, checking, et cetera, that goes with it over a year is then an extra $8,000 to $26,000. So you're looking at 40-odd thousand the first year and then following on from 20,000. So if anyone ever wondered, if I do want to provide financial advice and be within the law, it's going to cost you about that much.
Okay.
Which I thought, that's interesting. If you're running a business or whatever, because it only has to be one person that then you can use that person's credentials to operate a business with. So in the end, I thought, okay, that's pretty affordable.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I would have guessed more.
Same.
So this gets to my mere mortal moment. So what's your natural disposition towards the law? Do you find yourself breaking it, following the law? I already mentioned, but damn, do I follow them. I've always had this sort of disposition of, if you tell me something, I'm going to do it. If you say don't do that, I'm probably not going to do it. Now, this sort of contrasts with, I guess, my persona of saying I hate people telling me what to do.
Yep.
So how do I judge those two? And I think it's sort of, I like choosing my own games to play almost in a way. So like what systems I get to play in. So here's a fun one I haven't actually ever mentioned before. I was thinking about playing soccer all those years. What did I actually enjoy about playing soccer? It wasn't the competition, man. I never enjoyed the feeling of having beaten someone else. I liked the feeling of accomplishment of winning, but not the fact that I did it at the expense of someone else.
Yep.
And how I know this, multiple times in games, I would forget the score. And that's probably bad, because I wouldn't know if we're losing 2-1 or drawing 2-2.
Yep.
And there's a big difference between that when you're in the last 10 minutes of the game and sort of how you should be operating. So, so for me, that was sort of like one of those ones where it's like, maybe a little bit of side note there, wasn't directly related to the law, but school, I was really good at school. Just, smash it out. If you tell me to do this, there's the test, this is how you get your points, this is how you win at it. Okay, I'll do that. And then I just did it easily.
Yep.
Whereas now if you told me like, this is how you have to learn these things, I would say, no, I don't want to do it like that. I'll learn it, but I'll go do it on my own way. So I don't think like jaywalking and stuff, if I go to another country, and this is what they do, I'll just follow it, man. I won't jaywalk. Like Japan, for example, I felt bad every time I jaywalked because I knew they would not jaywalk, even if there was no cars.
Yeah.
They would go to it. So what's your sort of disposition?
Yeah, my disposition would be, I would say more follow it than not follow it. I'd still be that sort of person that if someone says, we got to do this, like at COVID times. Yeah. I'm not a person that would say, no, I'm not going to wear a mask.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Yeah.
Even if not that I don't agree, I just don't really care or think that masks are necessary right now, say in Queensland. If the law came out and said, hey, you need to wear a mask, I just go, okay, I'll wear a mask. Yep. I'm not opposed to following that. It's not opposing me in any way. It's not challenging me in any way. Maybe if the law in particular challenged me, and so I'll make up something really random. If it said something like, you cannot train at the gym before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m., which made it like almost impossible for me to train on a normal day. I would find ways to break that law.
Yeah.
I'd go somewhere else. I'd go to an underground gym. I'd do something. I'd just go and train somewhere else. Kind of makes me think when COVID was hitting and the outdoor parks started to shut down and you can't go in here and you can't do this. I felt okay going, you can't enforce this. I'm just going to do a pull-up here. I'm just going to do some pull-ups. That's fine. The park near my mum and dad's place, there's probably a couple of weeks in there where there was some signs like, oh, you're not allowed. Man, just go and do some pull-ups.
Was there signs on that
yes.
part?
Yeah.
Okay.
So to me, I thought, okay, that's not an enforceable thing. I don't see where this law, that's where you start bending some of the laws, but where others that I can see that they would have an effect on more people and it's much more enforceable, I'll be more aligned to following them too.
Yeah, and there's a big difference because there's sometimes, well, what you just said, what about when you've been told this is the law and there's a reason for this, but we're not going to articulate it to you and it seems
dumb for whatever reason.
Or insensible. What about those sort of situations?
Oh, I probably have to go back on, it depends on the punishment. So if the punishment, let's just say, again, something really dumb, like you can't step outside of your house before 9 a.m. That's the law. And they don't tell you why. I'd be inquisitive. And if they said the punishment was, you have to do 10 push-ups, then mate, I'm going outside. I'm going to go check out what's going on. But if they said the punishment is death, then I'm going to be more likely to follow that law.
Yeah.
I think my inquisitive nature would reside back in its place and mortality would come to the front.
Yeah. See, I probably tend to go more for even if I think it's dumb, I'll still follow it, but I'll just try and avoid it as much as I can. I just won't put myself in that situation. So, if it's, this building in particular, here's a good example. Apple stores, they, even in Australia, you still have to wear all the masks and to enter their store because they've just got this worldwide policy. Is this useful in Queensland? Probably not. But if you're going to enter their store in the Carindale shopping centre, you have to put on a goddamn mask. I would do it if I really had to go there, but then I would go, I'm not coming to this place again.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. One thing though about law is also, so what we're just talking about here, like whether you would breach it, whether you would push it. There is some instances, not all of them again, but where doing it can be a good thing.
Yeah, well, it's ethical to break the law.
Yes, there is ethical to break the law in some instances, but also it can be beneficial to break the law. So the only example I was going to give, and there's lots of them, but Uber.
Yep.
So Uber, in many countries, went through this period many years ago where it was basically touch and go whether it was illegal to even use Uber or not because they weren't considered to be ride-sharing services that you could legally use, lawfully use. And I think there's still continue to be lots of conversations, probably until very late or maybe still ongoing. But they pushed through anyway. So they came up with the idea of Uber. They began it as a ride-sharing app. It grew from the US. And probably in some portion of their mind, they thought, this is probably not legal in some way, shape, or form. But we've got to keep going because it's a good thing. And obviously, eventually, it is what it is today. But that was born through and probably went through a big period where it was, if you looked at maybe civil law, common law, it probably wasn't even allowed to be done, but it just kept on pushing because while there was some enforcement or they tried to enforce it, they also saw how much benefit was coming out of it in a broader market and went, oh, actually, we should let this continue.
Yeah. So I guess you could sort of, maybe there's maybe not as clear cut as that, but the Pirate Bay, so streaming music or Napster, for example, which is, yes, you're stealing people's work and you're getting it for free. And I'm sure we've all downloaded illegal stuff. Never? Bull crap. I'm kidding. I do not believe that 1 second. And yes, but there's, I think, some arguments to be made about why that was necessary for the music industry. Because
I've got to tell a good story. I've got to tell a good story here.
Tight. Well, I don't know. That every time I hear artists talking about what the music industry was like and is like now, it still sounds absolutely rubbish and hard, but it sounded even worse back in the day as well. That's true. So, I don't know. Yeah. Give me a story.
Well, just I don't know how incriminating this is going to be. It's probably not incriminating anymore. But this is before or during the time you use Napster, use Pirate Bay. Oh, me and my family did a different thing, which I reckon a lot of people do. I don't know if your family did this. We had an extra CD drive on the computer.
Okay.
The CD burner drive. You ever did burning of CDs?
I did.
Yeah. So we would go to the local library, would get our favorite game or favorite movie, and you wouldn't watch it. You'd burn it. And we'd stockpile this, 100 movies from the library, and we were like, oh yeah. Probably watched about half of them. A third of them broke and that never worked. So you'd return the library CD, and you'd go to watch it, and it was all demented and formatted incorrectly. And so you have to go back, re-get it from the library. Now, was that illegal?
Probably.
Probably. There's probably some law against that. There was no one enforcing it. So we got away with it scot-free. We probably saved ourselves $29 in all this process. But
nice.
Yep, breaking the rules, the laws from day one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if we.
And I'll just say, I guarantee, I'm guaranteeing, there's a mere moral guarantee that everybody who's listening to this podcast right now has broken a law.
Yeah.
Of some form or shape. You probably don't even know it.
I would say you've broken
many laws.
Many
that
laws.
you wouldn't even know about.
Yeah. I think you break laws just by living. There's probably laws saying, no, you can be in this place or you have to be in this place, and others saying, no, you can't be in this place at the same time.
Yeah.
So, whatever you do, you keep breaking the law. So might as well just break all of the laws.
Keep breaking the laws, folks. Keep breaking the laws.
But there's one law you shouldn't break.
Oh, there is one.
And that's listening to Mere Mortals daily.
Woo! Daily.
That's the unwritten
That's
law.
the Mere Mortal law.
It's not written down, but goddamn, you better follow it, or there'll be some punishments coming your way.
So in the future, so I'm talking 2035. So picture this: current Prime Minister of the UK. He's moved over there. Yep. They've recognised him for the bald-headed dude that could be a Prime Minister.
I'm pretty sure I said 2024 for the US. So
that's afterwards. So President 2024, Prime Minister in UK.
2028.
I'm at some position that nobody knows about, but it's highly power. And at that point, we're going to establish...
You're pulling my strings.
That's right. And I'm like the... What's those super powerful bankers? The Rothschilds? So I own the Rothschilds.
Yeah.
So then I'll tell them to, maneuver it, and they'll set law, the Mere Mortal law. That is, you must watch every episode. So get ahead of it right now, or else you're going to be spending 12,000 minutes watching it in 2035. You don't want to do that. You don't want to. You got other things to do. So the law is that. One minor law, of course, that I'll present to you is... if you enjoyed this podcast, if you enjoyed listening to our conversations and our tones, share it with one other person. That's how we grow. That's how we get around. So obviously share to one or two other people, friends who you think.
Get into discussion with a friend, telling them about the salmon law, the suspicious salmon law, and say, yep, I listened to this on the Mere Mortals.
Are they suspicious fish? Do they smell like fish? I don't give a shit. Tell them to listen to the Mere Mortals podcast. That's been it. One out.
Karen out. Arr.